Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a pretty huge story. The political and social history of Mexico, all the way from 1810, the start of the independence movement, right through to the more recent political scene in 2021.
It's a massive undertaking. We're talking centuries defined by, constant upheaval, strongmen, empires, revolutions. It's incredibly dense.
Absolutely, which is why we need a clear roadmap. So let's start with something maybe a bit surprising, the name Mexico itself and the capital.
Right, Mexico or Mexico Tenochtitlan. It comes from Nahuatl, the Aztec language. And while apparently there are something like 70 different ideas about what it means.
70, wow.
Yeah, quite a few. But a leading theory is it means moon navel, or maybe city in the middle of the lake of the moon.
And that image, the eagle eating a serpent on a cactus that's on the flag, it's everywhere that represents the founding of Tenochtitlan, Mexico City.
Exactly. It's central to the national identity.
So our goal here is to try and cut through all that complexity, give you a clear thematic look at this journey, the turbulent birth, the age of military leaders, the revolution, and then how power eventually got, well, institutionalized.
And what's really fascinating looking through the source material is this constant thread, this core conflict running through it all.
Which is?
It's the struggle between these powerful centralizing forces. Think the Spanish-born peninsulares early on, or later the presidents trying to control everything from the capital and the more decentralized, often rebellious local groups.
Like the criollos, the Spanish descendants born in the Americas.
Right, who had fewer rights than the peninsulares.
Yeah.
And also various indigenous groups, powerful regional forces. This tension, center versus periphery, it shapes almost everything we're going to talk about.
Okay, so let's unpack that first theme, the struggle for independence, starting around 1810. You mentioned it wasn't initially about completely breaking away from Spain.
No, not really. The catalyst wasn't some grand philosophy. It was pure chaos back in Spain. Napoleon puts his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the Spanish throne in 1808.
And that just throws the whole empire into disarray.
Precisely. And this instability, that's the opening the criollos were looking for. They felt sidelined by the peninsulares, the elite born in Spain.
So they used the chaos.
They framed their movement, cleverly, as defending the legitimate Spanish king, Ferdinand VII, against the French usurper.
Which brings us to Miguel Hidalgo, the priest. His famous Grito de Dolores, the Cry of Dolores, in 1810. The slogan itself sounds, well, contradictory. Long live the Virgin of Guadalupe. Death to bad government. Long live Ferdinand VII.
It does sound strange now, doesn't it? But it was smart politics at the time. Revolt against the corrupt local government and the French interference, not the Spanish crown itself, at least not openly.
And Hidalgo himself, the sources paint him as quite a character.
Oh, definitely. An eccentric. Apparently lived maritally, even faced charges for embezzlement earlier. His revolt was pretty explosive, but ultimately failed quickly. He was caught and executed in 1811.
But the idea didn't die with him. His student, Jose Maria Morelos, takes over.
Right. And Morelos is the one who really shifts the goal. He moves it towards actual statehood. He organizes a formal declaration of independence in 1813, gets a constitution written.
One that favored a strong legislature, interestingly.
Yes, but then history takes another turn. Independence is finally declared in 1821, but not by the revolutionaries like Morelos.
No, it's by General Agustín de Iturbide, a former royalist general.
Exactly. He switches sides. Why? Because he's afraid of the liberal reforms happening back in Spain. He basically pulls off a conservative coup to preserve the old power structures, just without direct Spanish rule.
So Mexico becomes independent as an empire under Emperor Agustín I.
For a very short time, yes.
Yeah.
Less than 2 years. He's overthrown, executed in 1824, and then they proclaim a republic. It's just chaos from day one.
Which leads perfectly into our next theme. How does this brand new federal republic, with its shiny 1824 constitution, almost immediately fall under the control of these military strongmen, the caudillos?
Well, that centralizing impulse just shifted, didn't it? From Spanish elites to ambitious Mexican military leaders. The power vacuum was immense.
And for about 30 years, the answer seems to be one man, Antonio López de Santa Anna.
Ah, Santa Anna. The eagle, or maybe more dramatically, Napoleon of the desert. He just dominates politics from the 1820s right up to 1855. President 5 times, bouncing in and out of power.
His career feels almost like a soap opera. Didn't he famously lose a leg?
He did. In 1838, fighting the French in the so-called Pastry War.
The Pastry War, seriously.
Yeah, triggered by a French baker demanding compensation for damages. But look, the key thing with Santa Anna is how his constant push for centralized power, for dictatorship, directly led to Mexico losing huge amounts of territory.
Starting with Texas in 1836, American settlers, the Anglos, and local Tejanos resisting his central rule.
Right. We all know the Alamo, a brutal moment, but Santa Anna ultimately gets crushed at San Jacinto. Captured, humiliated, Texas becomes independent.
And that was just the start of the losses, wasn't it?
Sadly, yes. The big one was the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 48. U.S. President Polk basically provoked it. Santa Anna, well, he initially seemed willing to sell some land to avoid war, then changed his mind, tried to fight.
And lost badly, leading to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Mexico cedes half its territory.
Half. California, Nevada, Utah, parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming.
Yeah.
It's a devastating loss.
And you mentioned internal strife playing a role, something about a revolt.
Yes, this is fascinating. The revolt of the Polkas. Locals in Veracruz, apparently financed by Polk, rose up against Santa Anna's government, essentially helping the U.S. invasion. It just underscores the deep internal divisions.
So even facing foreign invasion, Mexicans were fighting Mexicans, sometimes siding with the invaders.
It seems so. That fragmentation was a constant problem. And the final insult. The Gadsden Purchase in 1853. Santa Anna, back in power again briefly, sells another slice of land for $10 million.
You can see why the country finally had enough of him by 1855.
His downfall opens the door for a really crucial period, the Reform era, led by Benito Juarez.
Juarez, a Zapotec Indian, a lawyer. He represents the complete opposite of Santa Anna, right? A liberal federalist vision.
Absolutely. He wanted to build a modern, secular state. His reforms were radical. The 1857 Constitution, the Juarez Law ending special privileges for the military and the church.
Nationalizing church property, secularizing birth certificates, marriage records, proclaiming religious freedom. He was taking direct aim at the traditional power center.
He was. But all this reform led to more civil war, the Reform War, which bankrupted the country. So in 1861, Juarez has to suspend payments on foreign debts.
And Mexico owed a lot, especially to Britain, Spain, and France.
Right. Britain and Spain eventually worked things out. But Napoleon III of France, he saw an opportunity. Urged on by his wife, Empress Eugenie, he used the debt as an excuse to invade.
And not just to collect debt, he wanted to install a monarchy, right? With Archduke Maximilian of Austria as Emperor of Mexico.
Exactly. A European empire in the Americas. It was a clash of civilizations, almost Juarez's liberal republic versus this imported European monarchy. And the fighting was incredibly fierce.
You get stories like the Battle of Cameron in 1863.
A legendary battle. Just 65 French foreign legionnaires holding out against maybe 2,000 Juaristas. It became a cornerstone myth for the Legion, but it shows the brutality, the determination on both sides. Mexican conservatives supported Maximilian, while the Juaristas fought with intense patriotism.
What finally ended it?
The United States.
Yeah.
Once their civil war ended in 1865, they started putting pressure on France, invoking the Monroe Doctrine. Napoleon III pulled his troops out in 66.
And Maximilian...
Foolishly, he stayed, thought he could rally support. He was captured and executed by firing squad in 1867. A pretty grim end to that imperial dream.
So Juarez returns, triumphant. But things don't exactly stabilize, do they?
No, success seemed to make him more authoritarian. He didn't really tackle the deep-seated land inequality, and when he tried to run for a third term in 1871, it caused more rebellion.
And the countryside becomes unstable again. You mentioned bandoleros.
Yes, armed bandits, often using anarchist slogans, basically making large areas ungovernable. This instability, Juarez's perceived overreach, it all paves the way for the next strongman.
General Porfirio Diaz. Which brings us to our next major theme. Dictatorship, then revolution, then institutional power.
Right, the Porfiriato. Diaz, himself of mixed indigenous heritage, rules Mexico with an iron fist from 1876 basically until 1911. He ironically came to power opposing re-election, then proceeded to re-elect himself continuously.
He's known for modernizing Mexico, isn't he? Using foreign investment, mainly from the U.S.
Oh, massively. The railway network exploded from maybe 600 kilometers to nearly 25,000. Mines, oil, infrastructure. On paper, it looked like progress.
But progress for whom? What did it mean for ordinary Mexicans?
That's the crucial question. Historians call it unequal and combined development. All the wealth, all the benefits flowed to a tiny elite and foreign investors. By 1910, something like 95% of the rural population didn't own land. They were essentially serfs. And 1% of the population owned maybe 95% of the good farmland.
That level of inequality, it's just unsustainable, a recipe for explosion.
Absolutely. And the explosion came in 1910, starting with Francisco Madero, a wealthy landowner, oddly enough, campaigning for effective suffrage, no re-election.
His election in 1911 marks the start of the revolution, but he doesn't last long either.
No. Assassinated in 1913 by General Victoriano Huerta, nicknamed El Cucaracha, the cockroach.
Charming, and that throws the country into utter chaos again.
Total chaos. The really violent phase of the revolution, dominated by these powerful regional leaders, the revolutionary caudillos.
Like Emiliano Zapata in the South.
Leading indigenous peasants, demanding land reform, his famous Plan de Ayala.
And Pancho Villa in the North.
Villa, the former cattle rustler, turned brilliant, ruthless commander of the División del Norte.
And the detail about Villa, signing a movie contract with a U.S. film company to film his battles.
Isn't that incredible? He understood the power of media, even then. Sold the rights for cash and, reportedly, weapons. The Mexican Revolution became a spectacle.
So who finally comes out on top amidst all this fighting?
Eventually, Venustiano Carranza, he's more of a politician, manages to consolidate power, gets crucial recognition from the U.S. in 1915. His major legacy, though, is the 1917 Constitution.
Which is still Mexico's constitution today, right? And it was radical for its time.
Extremely radical. It enshrines social rights, an 8-hour workday, minimum wage, right to organize labor. But the real bombshell, especially for foreign investors, was Article 27.
What did that do?
It declared that all mineral wealth, oil, everything under the soil belonged to the Mexican nation, not private owners. It laid the groundwork for future nationalizations.
A huge assertion of national sovereignty. But the fighting didn't just stop in 1917. The main leaders, Zapata, Carranza himself, Villa, they're all eliminated eventually.
Yes, by the early 1920s, the main military figures are gone. The question becomes, how do you stop this cycle of violence? How do you institutionalize the revolution?
And the answer comes from Plutarco Elias Calles.
Right. In 1929, Calles creates the PNR, the National Revolutionary Party. This is the beginning of the party that will dominate Mexico for the rest of the century. He rules from behind the scenes during a period called the Maximiado.
So the revolution becomes a political party.
Essentially, yes. Yeah. A mechanism to centralize power and manage competing factions without constant warfare. But it's his successor, Lázaro Cárdenas, president from 1934 to 1940, who really breathes life into the revolution's promises.
Cárdenas is a huge figure. What were his key actions?
3 massive things. First, land reform on an unprecedented scale. He redistributed about 18 million hectares, creating the communal land holdings called ejidos. This finally addresses the PATA's core demand.
Okay, what else?
Second, in 1938, he nationalized the oil industry, kicking out the foreign companies and creating Pemex, the state oil company. He used Article 27 of the Constitution to justify it, a huge moment of national assertion.
And third,
he had the political muscle to exile Calles, ending the Maximiado and consolidating presidential power within the party structure.
So the party, later renamed the PRI Institutional Revolutionary Party, takes full control after Cárdenas, and they stay in power for how long?
71 consecutive years.
Yeah.
Until the year 2000. They shifted focus towards stabilizing development, industrialization, bringing unions, peasant groups, everyone under the party's umbrella.
How did they manage that for so long? Stability must have seemed appealing after decades of chaos.
Exactly. Corporatism was key.
Yeah.
The PRI offered stability, some economic growth, patronage, in return for political loyalty. It became this incredibly effective, all-encompassing political machine. But that image of stable, unified progress shattered in 1968.
The Tlatelolco massacre.
Yes. Just days before the Mexico City Olympics, hundreds of protesting students killed by government forces under President Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. It was a brutal shock, revealing the authoritarian fist inside the PRI's velvet glove.
It really exposed the hypocrisy, didn't it? The Revolutionary Party gunning down students.
It fractured the national consensus, especially among the youth and intellectuals. And adding another layer, the sources mention alleged CIA involvement.
CIA involvement? How?
Reports suggest the special units, the Halcones or Falcons, who carried out the massacre, were trained by the CIA. And even that Díaz Ordaz himself was listed as a CIA contact.
Wow. So even at the height of its institutional power, Mexico wasn't free from that external influence.
It seems not. That event, combined with economic problems later, started to erode the PRI's legitimacy. The oil boom in the 70s led to massive borrowing, then debt crisis in the 80s.
And the response was a shift towards neoliberalism.
Pretty much, yeah. Following the Chicago School ideas, this culminates with President Carlos Salinas de Gortari signing NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, in 1994.
Which seemed like the ultimate reversal of the revolution's goals.
It did, privatizing state companies, opening markets, and critically, Salinas pushed through constitutional changes that effectively ended the land reform program, the Ejido system.
So the very foundation of the PRI's revolutionary legitimacy was dismantled by the PRI itself.
In many ways, yes. That shift, combined with political scandals and growing opposition, finally exhausted the PRI's grip on power. They lost the presidency in 2000 to the PAN, the National Action Party.
The end of 71 years of continuous rule, a truly historic moment.
Absolutely. Ushering in a new era of multi-party competition, leading eventually to figures like Andrés Manuel López Obrador and his Morena party coming to power more recently.
So if we try to wrap this huge deep dive up, we've gone from this initial struggle to break from Spain, driven by local issues,
Through a really brutal century of military strongmen, civil wars, and massive territory loss, especially to the U.S.
which then led, paradoxically, to the revolution itself becoming institutionalized in this single dominant party, the PRI.
A party that delivered stability for decades, but ultimately couldn't escape its own contradictions, the authoritarianism underneath, and the pressures of globalization.
Key takeaways for you listening. Think about those larger-than-life figures. Hidalgo, the reluctant priest; Santa Anna, the seemingly indestructible loser; Villa, the revolutionary media star.
And the foundational documents like the 1857 and 1917 constitutions, which tried to define completely different visions for Mexico. And always remember the human costs, the inequality under Diaz, the violence of the revolution, Tlatelolco, the dislocations caused by NAFTA.
Right. Now, the sources we looked at raise an interesting point. The way the Spanish Empire fragmented into all these rival states might have inherently weakened the whole region. They contrast it with Brazil, which stayed united and arguably fared better overall.
That's a provocative comparison.
It leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Considering this history, the constant internal conflict, the cycle of strong men, the immense external pressure, did the very process of forging a Mexican identity through centuries of turmoil ultimately make it harder for the nation to achieve lasting, genuine sovereignty, free from being overwhelmed by outside economic and political forces? Something to think about.